R.L. Stine's Click. My name is Seth Gold and I'm 12. My hobby is channel surfing on the TV, at least that used to be my hobby. Why did I sit for hours clicking from channel to channel with the remote control? I guess I loved the feeling of power it gave me. A boring show, click, on to the next. A loud commercial about sinus headaches, click, on to something better. Sometimes I tried to imagine what life was like when people had to get up and walk over to the TV every time they wanted to change the channel, but it was just too awful to think about. One day, my dad came home from work carrying a package about the size of a shoebox. He plunged it down on the kitchen table. "Wait till you see this," he exclaimed, removing the wrapping. My 4-year-old sister, Megan, shoved past me. "What is it? What is it? Let me see," she begged. I read the big black letters on the box. "Universal Remote." "I got a great deal on this," Dad explained. "I was on my way home from work, and I passed a little store I'd never seen before. It was going out of business. This thing was only $6. Great, huh? What does it do?" I asked, pulling it carefully out of the box. "It's just like our regular remote control, except it works everything," Dad explained. "It will work the TV, the VCR, the CD player. If we had a Laserdisc player, it would work that too." "Wow," I exclaimed, excited. "Can I try it?" "Sure, Seth," Dad replied. "Just put some batteries in it." I took some AA batteries out of the kitchen junk drawer and loaded them into the chamber. Then I examined the remote. It was slender and black, it fit nicely into my hand, and it had a million buttons on it. This was going to be awesome. I ran up the stairs to the den. "Don't watch TV for too long," my mother shouted after me. "You have homework, remember?" But I was already gone. For the next hour, I fooled around with the new remote. It was really excellent. I could go back and forth between the videotape and the TV. I could play a CD while watching the Weather Channel with the sound turned off. It looked as if the weatherman were singing. Megan wandered in. "I want to watch a cartoon tape," she said. "Not now," I told her. "I'm busy." "But I want to," she insisted. "Not now, Megan. Beat it." "I'm telling," she whined. "You are not," I cried, reaching to stop her. To my surprise, she grabbed the remote control out of my hand. Then she pulled back her arm and flung the new remote across the room. It crashed into the radiator and fell to the floor. "Now look what you did," I shrieked angrily. I picked up the remote from the floor and shook it. It rattled. It hadn't rattled before. I clicked it at the TV. Nothing happened. "You jerk," I cried. "Now we can't watch anything." "Sorry," Megan replied softly. She stuck her thumb into her mouth and backed slowly out of the room. I sat down on the sofa and went to work on the remote. Using a quarter, I pried off the back and studied the insides. Not much in there except for a few chips and wires. I wiggled things as much as I dared and then closed it up. Holding it up to my ear, I shook it. No rattle. I pointed it at the TV. Click. It worked again. 10 minutes later, I was busily channel surfing when my mother stormed into the room. "Seth, I'm very disappointed in you. I told you not to watch for long, and there are chores to be done in this house, and your sister tells me you won't let her have a turn." And on she yelled, shaking her head. I tried to tune her out, but she was yelling louder and louder. So I pointed the remote at her and pushed mute. It was a joke, just a dumb joke, but the most amazing thing happened. Mom was still yelling, but no sound came out. I had really muted her. I pushed the button again, and "Your room is a mess, and your homework isn't getting done," and click, I muted her again. She continued yelling silently. Awesome, this was really awesome. I could mute my own mother with the new remote control. "So you'd better start shaping up, mister," she finished. She turned and stormed out of the room. "Wow," I cried out loud. Sitting on the edge of the sofa, I stared at the buttons on the remote. A few seconds later, our beagle, Sparky, walked into the room. "Hey, boy," I said. Sparky trotted over and started scratching himself behind the ear with his back leg. I stared down at the remote again. I had to try it once more. I saw a button labeled slow motion. I pointed the remote at Sparky, pressed the button, and held it. Sparky started scratching himself very, very slowly. I could see his lips flapping as his head twisted slowly back and forth. His ears floated around in the air. "Unbelievable," I whooped. I let go of the button, and Sparky started scratching himself at normal speed again. "I can control the world with this remote," I told myself. I was so excited, I nearly dropped it again. "Dinner," Mom called from downstairs. "Be right down," I shouted. I tucked the remote in my jeans pocket. I wasn't going to let it out of my sight. Then I charged down the stairs. I was too excited to focus on eating my tuna casserole. I picked at my dinner, thinking about the remote, feeling it in my pocket. My mother frowned as she cleared the plates. "Well, Seth," she said, "maybe you'll be more interested in dessert." I glanced at the bowl, chocolate pudding, my favorite. Mom spooned it into plates, and I gobbled down my portion. Then I had a brilliant idea. I quietly pulled out the remote and studied the buttons under the table. Ah, there it was. Rewind. I pushed the button and held it. In rapid motion, Mom, Dad, and Megan unate their pudding. I kept rewinding until Mom appeared with the bowl of pudding, then I let the buttons go. Well, Seth, she said again, maybe you'll be more interested in dessert. Then we all had pudding again. You bet, I said, gobbling down my second portion. Ha! This was excellent. When I was done, I pushed rewind again and then one more time until I'd had 4 dishes of chocolate pudding. I was stuffed. Next morning, I carried the remote to school with me. I knew I shouldn't be messing around with it, but I couldn't help myself. It was too much fun. After the first bell rang, it was time for the flag salute. I decided I had heard it enough times, so I muted it. Everyone sat down, and now said Miss Gifford, "I'm going to have a pop quiz in geography, you lucky people." She started passing out papers. Oh no, a pop quiz. I'd been so busy with the new remote I hadn't done the homework. I didn't know anything about South America. I swallowed several times, thinking hard. Then I remembered the remote, and I relaxed. I had a plan. Mrs. Gifford finished passing out the papers. "Okay, everyone," she said. "You'll have 20 minutes. Oh, good luck." I took a quick glance at my test paper. It was full of questions I knew nothing about. The capital of Brazil, not a clue. But I wasn't worried. I doodled on my notebook while everyone else got busy answering the questions. Nearly all the time had passed. 30 seconds left, announced Mrs. Gifford. I waited another 15 seconds. Then I took the remote out of my pocket. I hit freeze frame. Everybody froze. Mrs. Gifford stopped in the middle of a yawn, glancing out the window. Mickey Delaney froze in the middle of scratching his nose. Annie Schwartz, the best student in the class, froze in the middle of putting her pencil neatly down on the desk. I stood up and strolled over to Annie's desk. I took my test paper with me. I peered over Annie's shoulder at her answers. San Salvador? Okay. Andes Mountains? Okay. I wrote all of Annie's answers onto my test sheet. Then I strolled back to my desk, sat down, and hit the freeze frame button again. Everybody snapped back into motion. "Okay, everyone," said Mrs. Gifford. "Pencils down." I set my pencil down, making a great show of looking exhausted. Then I passed my paper up to the front. This was really cool. After the test, I looked for more ways to have fun. I fast-forwarded the teacher and the entire class for a while. I slow-motioned the principal when she came to talk to the teacher, and then froze the whole class again. When the teacher squeaked her chalk on the blackboard, I turned the volume way up. Finally, the bell rang for lunch. I couldn't wait to go down to the lunchroom, a whole new place to have fun. The lunchroom was the usual zoo. Everyone yelling and laughing, straw wrappers and juice boxes flying everywhere, kids falling off their chairs, dropping their lunch trays. Mr. Pincus, the lunchroom monitor, ran around yelling at everyone to sit down. I pointed the remote at him and froze him in his tracks. Then I stepped into the food line. I took a cheeseburger, a salad, and 2 desserts. "You can't have 2 desserts," said the lunchroom lady. "You know that." I didn't even think twice. I pointed the remote at her and punched the mute button. She continued to lecture me silently. Quite pleased with myself, I continued down the line and picked up a carton of milk. Before I went to sit down, I pointed the remote at the lunchroom lady again and pressed mute to turn her voice back on. Nothing happened. I pressed the buttons again. She was still talking about making a sound. I banged the remote against my tray and tried again, but she still didn't get her voice back. Well, it really isn't a tragedy if that lunchroom lady is muted for a while, I thought to myself. I never liked her anyway. I figured the remote must need a little jiggling. I'd get to work. I reached over to take another dessert, but as I set the plate of pie down on my tray, my blood turned to ice. The remote wasn't there. Breathing hard, I tried to think, where was it? I had set it on the tray, hadn't I? I swallowed hard, feeling my panic rise. "Freeze, Seth." I glanced up to see Danny Wexler, a big, freckled-faced, red-headed 8th grader, standing a few feet away, pointing the remote at me. "Danny, don't touch that," I pleaded. "Don't press any buttons." Danny grinned at me. "Why not? Hey, why do you have a remote control in school anyway?" He moved his finger over the buttons, deciding which one to push. "Don't touch it," I begged. I dove for him and snatched it out of his hand. "Hand it back, Seth," Danny growled. His eyes narrowed. His expression turned mean. He moved toward me with his hand outstretched. In a panic, I hit the freeze frame button and froze him. I started to back away, but a girl's startled cry made me stop. "Hey, what's going on? Why is Danny frozen like that?" Melissa Fink stood staring at us. I realized in horror that she could see Danny, could see what was going on. Other kids were starting to crowd around. "What is that?" Melissa demanded. She tried to pull the remote out of my hand. Don't touch it, I warned. Please. What is going on here? A woman's voice burst in. I glanced up to see the principal. What's all this commotion? She saw the remote in my hand. Seth, let me see that. In a total panic, I pushed freeze frame and froze her. The lunchroom filled with frightened shouts. Seth froze the principal. Somebody help. Seth froze the principal. A big crowd moved around me. I started to back away. I pressed the freeze frame button again to unfreeze the principal, but it didn't work. She stayed still as a statue. My brain was whirling. The whole room started to spin. The shouts and cries of the other kids made it hard to think straight. What had I done? What if I can't unfreeze her? I thought, my entire body trembling. What if I can't unfreeze Danny or Mr. Pincus? Would they stay like that forever? I knew I was in trouble now, major trouble. Get Seth, someone shouted. Get that thing away from him. I turned and ran for the lunchroom door. Kids came running after me. Stop him, they shouted. I turned back and pointed the remote at them. I started pushing buttons frantically. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so frightened, so totally panicked. My heart pounded. My stomach was doing wild flip-flops. I pushed button after button. None of them worked. None of them did anything. Stop, Seth. Stop him. The crowd continued to chase me. I pushed another button, not working. Nothing worked. And then I pushed the button marked off. Hey, I cried out as the world went black. I blinked several times, but the darkness didn't lift. It was silent now, silent and black. I'm all alone, I realized. No shouting kids, no kids at all, no school, no light, no picture, no sound. A faint glow in my hand made me raise the remote control. I brought it close to my face. A small red light blinked steadily. Squinting into the blinking light, I read the words beneath it. Battery dead.